without conscience, the disturbing world of the psychopaths among us. Robert D. Hare, Ph.D. Continuation. Without conscience, without conscience. Good people are really suspicious. They cannot imagine others doing the things they themselves are incapable of doing. Usually they accept the undramatic solution as the correct one and let matters rest there. Then too the normal are inclined to visualize the psychopath as one who's as monstrous in appearance as he is in mind, which is about as far from the truth as one could well get. These monsters of real life usually looked and behaved in a more normal manner than their actually normal brothers and sisters. They presented a more convincing picture of virtue than virtue presented of itself, just as the wax rosebud or the plastic peach seemed more perfect to the eye, more what the mind thought a rosebud or a peach should be than the impact original from which it had been modeled. William March, The Bad Seed. Introduction. The problem. Several years ago, 2 graduate students and I submitted a paper to a scientific journal. The paper described an experiment in which we had used a biomedical recorder to monitor electrical activity in the brains of several groups of adult men, while they performed a language task. This activity was traced on a chart paper as a series of waves referred to as an electroencephalogram, in brackets EEG. The editor returned our paper with his apologies. His reason, he told us: frankly, we found some of the brain wave patterns depicted in the paper very odd. Those EEGs could not have come from real people. Some of the brainwave recordings were indeed odd, but we had not gathered them from aliens, and we certainly had not made them up. We had obtained them from a class of individuals found in every race, culture, society, and walk of life. Everybody has met these people, been deceived and manipulated by them, and forced to live with or repair the damage they have wrought. These often charming but always deadly individuals have a clinical name: psychopaths. The hallmark is a stunning lack of conscience. Their game is self-gratification at the other person's expense. Many spend time in prison, but many do not. All take far more than they give. This book confronts psychopathy head-on and presents the disturbing topic for what it is: a dark mystery with staggering implications for society. A mystery that finally is beginning to reveal itself after centuries of speculation and decades of empirical psychological research. To give you some idea of the enormity of the problem that faces us, consider that there are at least 2 million psychopaths in North America. The citizens of New York City have as many as 100,000 psychopaths among them. And these are conservative estimates, far from being an esoteric, isolated problem that affects only a few people. Psychopathy touches virtually every one of us. Consider also that the prevalence of psychopathy in our society is about the same as that of schizophrenia, a devastating mental disorder that brings heart-wrenching distress to patient and family alike. However, the scope of the personal pain and distress associated with schizophrenia is small compared to the extensive personal, social, and economic carriage wrought by psychopaths. They cast a wide net, and nearly everyone is caught in it one way or another. The most obvious expressions of psychopathy, but by no means the only ones, involve flagrant criminal violation of society's rules. Not surprisingly, many psychopaths are criminals, but many others remain out of prison, using the charm and chameleon-like abilities to cut a wide swath through society and leaving a wake of ruined lives behind them. Together, these pieces of the puzzle form an image of a self-centered, callous, and remorseless person, profoundly lacking in empathy and the ability to form warm emotional relationships with others. A person who functions without the restraints of conscience. If you think about it, you will realize that what is missing in this picture are the very qualities that allow human beings to live in social harmony. It is not a pretty picture, and some express doubt that such people exist. To dispel this doubt, you need only consider the more dramatic examples of psychopathy that have been increasing in our society in recent years. Dozens of books, movies, and television programs, and hundreds of newspaper articles and headlines tell the story. Psychopaths make up a significant portion of the people the media describe: serial killers, rapists, thieves, swindlers, con men, wife beaters, white-collar criminals, high-prone stock promoters, and boiler room operators, child abusers, gang members, disbarred lawyers, drug barons, professional gamblers, members of organized crime, doctors who've lost their licenses, terrorists, cult leaders, mercenaries, and unscrupulous business people. Read the newspaper in this light, and the clues to the extent of the problem virtually jump off the page. Most dramatic are the cold-blooded, conscienceless killers who both repel and fascinate the public. Consider this small sampling from the hundreds of accounts available, many of which have been made into movies. John Gacy, Des Plaines, Illinois contractor and junior Chamber of Commerce Man of the Year, who entertained children as Pogo the Clown, had his picture taken with President Carter's wife, Rosalind, and murdered 32 young men in the 1970s, burying most of the bodies in the crawl space under his house. Charles Sobharé, a French citizen born in Saigon, who was described by his father as a distractor, became an international confidence man, smuggler, gambler, and murderer, who left a trail of empty wallets, bewildered women, drugged tourists, and dead bodies across much of Southeast Asia in the 1970s. Jeffrey MacDonald, a physician with the green beards, who murdered his wife and 2 children in 1970, claimed that acid heads had committed the crimes, became the focus of a great deal of media attention, and was the subject of the book and the movie Fatal Vision. Gary Tyson, a convicted murderer who masterfully manipulated the criminal justice system, used his 3 sons to help him escape from an Arizona prison in 1978, and went on a vicious killing spree that took the lives of 6 people. Kenneth Bianchi, one of the hillside stranglers who tortured and murdered a dozen women in the Los Angeles area in the late 1970s, turned in his cousin and accomplice, in brackets, Angelo Buono, and fooled some experts into believing that he was a multiple personality and that the crimes had been committed by Steve Richard Remires, a Satan-worshipping serial killer known as the Night Stalker, who proudly described himself as evil, was convicted in 1987 of 13 murders and 30 other felonies, including robbery, burglary, rape, sodomy, oral copulation, and attempted murder. Diane Dance, who shot her own children to attract men who did not want children, and portrayed herself as the real victim. Ted Bundy, the all-American serial killer who was responsible for the murders of several dozen young women in the mid-1970s, claimed that he had read too much pornography and that a malignant entity had taken over his consciousness and was recently executed in Florida. Clifford Olson, a Canadian serial murderer who persuaded the government to pay him $100,000 to show the authorities where he buried his young victims, does everything he can to remain in the spotlight. Joe Hunt, a fast-talking manipulator who masterminded a rich kid's phony investment scheme, in brackets popularly known as the Billionaire Boys Club, in Los Angeles in the early 1980s, conned wealthy people into parting with their money and was involved into murders. William Bradfield, a smooth-talking classics teacher convicted of killing a colleague and her 2 children. Ken McElroy, who for years robbed, rapid, burned, shot, and maimed the citizens of Skidmore, Missouri, without conscience or remorse, until he was finally shot dead in 1981 as 45 people watched. Colin Pitchfork, an English flasher, rapist, and murderer, was the first killer to be convicted on the basis of DNA evidence. Kenneth Taylor, a philandering New Jersey dentist who abandoned his first wife, tried to kill his second wife, savagely beat his third wife on their honeymoon in 1983, battered her to death the next year, hid her body in the trunk of his car while he visited his parents and his second wife, and later claimed he had killed his wife in self-defense when she attacked him following his discovery that she was sexually abusing their infant child. Konstantin Paspalakis and Deirdre Hunt, who videotaped the torture and murder of a young man, are now on death row. Individuals of this sort and the terrifying crimes they commit certainly grab our attention. Sometimes they share the spotlight with a mixed bag of killers and mass murderers whose crimes, often unbelievably horrific, appear to be related to serious mental problems. For example, Ed Gein, a psychotic killer who skinned and ate his victims. Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer, sexual sadist and necrophilic who mutilated and dismembered his victims. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, killer who preyed on young couples in parked cars. And parked cars. And Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee monster, who pleaded guilty to torturing, killing, and mutilating 15 men and boys, and was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms. Although these killers often judged sane, as were Kemper, Berkowitz, and Dahmer, the unspeakable acts, the grotesque sexual fantasies, and the fascination with power, torture, and death severely test the bounds of sanity. Psychopathic killers, however, are not mad. According to accepted legal and psychiatric standards, their acts result not from a deranged mind, but from a cold, calculating rationality combined with a chilling inability to treat others as thinking, feeling human beings. Such morally incomprehensible behavior exhibited by a seemingly normal person leaves us feeling bewildered and helpless. As disturbing as this is, we must be careful to keep some perspective here, for the fact is that the majority of psychopaths manage to ply their trade without murdering people. By focusing too much on the most brutal and newsworthy examples of their behavior, we run the risk of remaining blind to the larger picture. Psychopaths who don't kill, but who have a personal impact on our daily lives. We are far more likely to lose our life savings to an oily-tongued swindler than our lives to a steely-eyed killer. Nevertheless, high-profile cases have considerable value. Typically, they are well documented, alerting us to the fact that such people exist, and that before being caught they were relatives, neighbors, or co-workers of people just like us. These examples also illustrate a frightful and perplexing theme that runs through the case histories of all psychopaths: a deeply disturbing inability to care about the pain and suffering experienced by others. In short, a complete lack of empathy, the prerequisite for love. In a desperate attempt to explain this lack, we turn first to family background, but there is little to help us there. It is true that the childhoods of some psychopaths were characterized by material and emotional deprivation and physical abuse. But for every adult psychopath from a troubled background, there is another whose family life apparently was warm and nurturing, and whose siblings are normal, conscious people with the ability to care deeply for others. Furthermore, most people who had horrible childhoods do not become psychopaths or callous killers. Illuminating as they may be in other areas of human development, the arguments that children subjected to abuse and violence become abusive and violent adults are of limited value here. There are deeper, more elusive explanations of why and how psychopathy emerges. This book represents my quarter-century search for those answers. A major part of this quest has been a concerned effort to develop an accurate means by which to identify psychopaths among us. For if we can't spot them, we are doomed to be their victims, both as individuals and as a society. To give just one all too common example, most people are perplexed whenever a convicted killer paroled from prison promptly commits another violent offense. They ask incredulously, why was such a person released? Their puzzlement would no doubt turn to outrage if they knew that in many cases the offender was a psychopath whose violent recidivism could have been predicted if the authorities, including the parole board, had only done their homework. It is my hope that this book will help the general public and the criminal justice system to become more aware of the nature of psychopathy, the enormity of the problems it poses, and the steps that can be taken to reduce its devastating impact on our lives. Chapter 1: Experiencing the Psychopath. Okay, let's stop here.